Hello everyone, welcome to the lecture for English Units 3 and 4. My name is Sunny. I'm really excited to be delivering this Head Start lecture to you all today, and I hope that you find it really helpful. Let's jump right into it. So we'll begin with a little bit of information about myself. As I mentioned, my name is Sunny. I completed VCE in 2021 and was college dux of my school, finishing with an ATAR of 96.70. I received study scores of 40 plus in my English subjects, and I completed English literature and English language as part of my VCE. And I'm currently completing a Bachelor of Paramedicine course at Monash University, and I'm in the final year of my degree. So we'll begin straight away with the content, but this slide also shows you what today's content has been split into. So we're kind of going based off what the exam sections are. And after looking at some English skills that you really need for the whole year, we'll be looking at each section. We'll be looking at text response, section A, in a lot of detail, then looking at crafting text, your new area of study following the study design changes, and we'll have just a very brief look at analyzing argument as you'll be doing that later in the year. So the three sections of your exam are also as follows. You will have a text response analytical essay for the first section. Based on one of the texts that you study, um, you will have to choose from two prompts, choose one of the prompts, and write an analytical essay in response to that prompt. And I really want to stress here that it has to be in response to the prompt and not something that you want to just write about. So you need to be prepared for a variety of prompts, have a range of quotes for various prompts that you could get. And rote learning and memorizing essays won't really get you anywhere far. So it's good to know that early on in the year and ensure that you're studying appropriately. There's no comparative aspects to the task, there's no external sources, there's minimal background information about the text. It's heavily analytical in terms of the background info that you do use and analyze is just in your analysis linking things back to the context of your text should be done as part of your analysis. It's all about the quality of your interpretation, your overall response to the prompt, your big argument, how you prove that, justify that through your sub arguments, the quality of the evidence that you pick, and the range of different evidence that you use from the text, and how well you then analyze that evidence to connect it to fees and values and authorial intent ideas. Section B is going to be crafting text on the exam. For a very long time, it used to be a comparative essay, and now a new task has been introduced. We will be looking at it. This task does involve creative writing. It's not the same as creative responses in the past where you work with a book to sort of replicate the style of the author and your creative has to fit into the book or alter the book in some way, but it becomes a completely unique creative task. As part of it, you study various texts of different text types and different genres called mentor text to essentially get inspiration and ideas for your own writing with regards to a specific framework that has been given to you. So you do have a specific theme or big idea that you need to be writing about and you need to be looking for in all of your mentor texts and analyzing how your mentor text presented that idea, embedded it within their writing. We'll look at that in a little bit more detail when we get to the crafting text part of the session. There will probably be, of course, there will be a sample exam released this year. So keep an eye out. It will probably be up very, very soon, and give you a look at what the exam task will actually look like. Section C is analyzing argument. The only new study design change here is that you will be also analyzing audio material, such as podcasts and things like that, and videos. But everything remains the same. You're writing about how an author has constructed their argument through various persuasive language techniques and how that aims to influence their audience. So, how you will be assessed for your text response criteria, assessors will be looking at whether you have demonstrated that you have knowledge and understanding of your set text. Um, to show that you do, you must have, strong interpretations and a range of different evidence and quotes. So, using quotes from different characters, quotes about different themes, having lots of evidence that relates to various language devices and genre specific features, as well as analysis of structural features of the text and the text actual construction, if appropriate for the text that you're working with. They will also be looking at whether you have demonstrated an ability to explore a text's ideas and issues. So there must be analysis of the author's views and values. What's their authorial intent? What did the author set out to do? Being aware that this shouldn't just make up the concluding sentences of each and every one of your paragraphs, but it should be scattered more times throughout your essay within your body paragraphs, not just in those concluding sentences. So you need to go in depth as part of text response and your analytical essay into the author's views and values, and make it clear that you're writing about the author's views. I see a lot of students still like failing to use the author's last name plus a writer does word to indicate that they're writing about authorial intent. And you need to make sure you're always doing this. Um, Look at the development of coherent analysis in response to the topic. So it's not just about the flow, but have you fully addressed the prompt? Do you have a counter argument as well? Do you have a body paragraph that's a counter argument to the position you've chosen? That must be done every single time. Are your arguments building on each other and developing throughout the essay? There needs to be that logical ordering, and the ideas need to be getting more complex in a nutshell in each body paragraph. Uh, and you are assessed against your control and effectiveness of language use. So, essay structure is crucial. Writing flow, sentence structure, clarity are crucial in this subject in order to do well. And if you struggle with that, make sure to do tons of practice writing throughout the year to help. Now, argument analysis criteria. You're looking at the knowledge understanding of the author's argument. What are they trying to persuade their audience of with their, whatever it may be, opinion piece, speech. Uh, and you need to show that you understand that contention. So we'll be looking at the elements of a contention, and that's what needs to go in your introduction for these essays. But there are 5 elements that form your contention for you to have a solid contention. So it's not just what is the author's main point of view, but there are a few other things there. We'll have a look at that formula. Do you understand the arguments and points of view? What are your topic sentences? What are your sub arguments? Are they accurate? Analysis of language and visual features. So your ability to analyze and find and name using meta language, persuasive language techniques throughout your body paragraphs, and incorporate visual analysis because visuals must always be analyzed. Um, So you need to have a lot of vocabulary under your belt for this task, and make sure you're not just using the typical persuasive language techniques that everyone always finds, and you add some more complex ones in there. Um, so, of course, control and effectiveness of language is still assessed. Cool. So, just some general notes for the subject overall. I want to stress the importance of planning for all of your essays. Never skip planning time before you write essays, because otherwise you're not writing the best piece that you could possibly write. Making, your practice writing tasks less effective. You have a lot less benefit from those tasks because you haven't done your best work. And planning is a skill you will need for the exam, where you have very little time, 60 minutes per essay. um, you need to make sure you're able to do a very solid plan very, very quickly so you can write the best essay possible. Okay, so this is how I recommend you should lay out your plans. While it's not exam time, it's just the start of the year, so you can do a detailed plan for now, um, to ensure you're improving your essays. So every plan should have a contention, that thesis statement that's going to go in your introduction of your analytical essay. And here we have, although Mary Shelley considers the moral and ethical implications of scientific advancement, the enlightenment of the creature implies that such curiosity is innate to mankind and thus inextricable from the human condition. So we see a solid contention there that has strong vocab, addresses the prompt, which is about moral and ethical implications of science. Okay, does state an argument and a counter argument, and that being that the student clearly agrees that there are moral and ethical negative consequences of science, but that also states those arguments that it's part of the human condition, it's part of human nature to be curious with science. And then you should note point your topic sentences, phrase them to be as clear but also as solid as possible. So they should each aim to have a really strong idea in there. Um, if you practice writing it out your topic sentences first, not just putting them into your essay straight away, you'll notice that they'll start getting a lot better. So I always recommend writing them down first. When you start writing them down a second time for the purpose of being put in your essay, they're likely to be improved. And you'll also notice if some of your arguments don't answer the prompt very well, aren't very relevant or very strong, you'll be able to scrap them if you plan, and change them to better arguments. And you can also note point your evidence. Note in this example, it's too little. You'll probably be using 4 pieces of evidence at least in a body paragraph, but there is some language devices as well in there, which is an expectation in English for all of your essays, that you should have analysis of language devices with the appropriate meta language to name them. Okay, so meta language is all those fancy words we use to appropriately name language techniques and appropriately name structural devices, okay? And you don't just need to know it for argument analysis, such as those things like inclusive language, rhetorical questions, but you should know them for your set text. You should do research to find out what language devices are in your text and use that in essays. Specifically, I recommend looking for structural features and specific techniques for your set text type. So, for example, if you're working with poetry, you look for language devices that are specific to poetry. Essentially, every single time you put a quote into your essay, and it has some relation to a language device, a structural device, you need to be naming it using the appropriate meta language, and you should zoom into that language, analyze the actual device itself, and explain what it means and how it creates a certain effect. Um, so language devices in your analysis do need to be, in a way, explained as to what you think they mean. Don't just leave it there and go analyze authorial intent or just move on. Um, so to work with analyzing them, you will need to put in some work to making sure you understand what they are, and you could define them, give an example, and knowing their general purpose. So, what does a metaphor, for example, generally do? Well, it describes something by describing something else, to create that sort of imagery. So, that's knowing that general purpose, but then in the context of your specific text, you need to make that analysis specific to your text, obviously. Um, So work on expanding your meta language, create vocab lists for each text that you study this year, and you'll find that hopefully that will really help you. Just develop some strong words that you can use for any essay pretty much over and over. Get a list of strong verbs that describe what the author is doing, because you need these for every single essay. Tone words that you'll use later in argument analysis, um, some adjectives that help you in nouns. So you can break it up like that. Just words that will typically come up in your sentences. Um, okay. Looking at the difference between evidence and analysis and their relationship. This is really important, and you need this knowledge for this whole year. But your evidence and analysis should be intertwined. You should never have evidence without analyzing it first. The only exception is if you have presented a quote and you've analyzed it, and if you want to say this is further supported by another piece of evidence, okay? That's probably the only exception to where you can skip analysis because you're saying, oh, this further supports the idea, but you need to still explain how it further supports that analytical idea that you've presented, if that makes sense. You won't have to analyze, but you need to explain how it links in a short sentence, let's say. You can never have discussion without supporting it with evidence either. A lot of students in English and students that I've had can go on a little bit of might be going on a little bit of a ramble where they, let's say, they've analyzed one piece of evidence or two pieces of evidence in that body paragraph, and then because they had a lot to say, there's four sentences of analysis following that. That's delving really deep into the text. Maybe it's interesting ideas, maybe it's solid ideas, but there's no justification for them because where's the evidence, okay? So be really careful. Also, avoid summarizing. There's no need for a ton of contextual information around your evidence. Um, Keep it to the very bare minimum, okay? If it's something a character said to another character, just have their names, who said what to whom, okay? You need to understand that summarizing is wasting your word count and your time to write your essay. And your teachers have, and your assessors on the exam will as well, have intimate knowledge of the text that you're working with. So there's no need for overly going into too much detail to explain plot elements, explaining what's happening in the backdrop of this quote. Please try to avoid that. Look at some examples, and you will see that many students pretty much almost completely avoid detailing the story to contextualize their quotes. And nominalization might help you, might be a strategy that you can use. This is essentially where you turn a verb or an adverbial into a noun. and put it at the front of your sentence or phrase, and it forces you to analyze essentially. So if we look at this example, this is the one that hasn't been altered. The playwright depicts Bob walking down the street through the movement of his feet, one in front of the other. Now, looking at the second example, we've taken this verb depicts. This sentence only had evidence, and we've nominalized it to create a noun phrase and put it at the head of the sentence. Instead, saying the playwright's depiction of Bob walking down the street through the movement of his feet, one in front of the other. By nominalizing it, we can't end our sentence there. It makes it grammatically impossible to finish the sentence there. So we've added implies that, and that forces us to analyze and write our analytical idea. Really good strategy. A few more examples here. You can change your author's intent verbs to nouns, depicts a depiction, portrays a portrayal, works with anything really, and you just plop it at the head of the sentence where you're trying to analyze. So nominalization not only forces you to analyze, but it also prevents summary. By cutting that sentence there, where we said implies that, we have to write down what it implies, it won't let us retell those plot elements. So it's really, really useful. So we can compare these examples. The character experiences a plethora of emotions as she walks down the neighborhood she grew up in. That's just a retelling of the story. There's no evidence or analytical idea there. But if we say the character's experience of a plethora of emotions as she walks down the neighborhood reflects the conflicting events of her childhood, we have an analytical idea there, and we've avoided summary. Bit of a meta language list for you guys to use. So intent verbs for your authorial intent when you're writing about what the author is trying to do or what message they have to our audience. You should also add more to this list. There's tons and tons more, but what we never want to see is show. Author shows, blah, blah, blah. The ones that are generally frowned upon in English that we don't want to see in essays are show, make, and says. Those three words are words that need to be replaced and removed from your essays. Show, make, and says. Okay, now in terms of modality, modal verbs basically express how certain or confident you are about something. So the whole point of English is not to use high modality language, high certainty language, because then you're fence-sitting and indicating that you have opinions that are basically correct and everyone else is wrong. Okay, so you should never write with high modality and you should always be less definitive. So I've included as an example just to have a look at high modality. You can see must, mustn't. Oh, this must indicate that. This has to indicate that. That's not okay language to use in an essay. Now looking at medium modality, it's also iffy. You can't say, oh, I think this should, writing in an essay, I believe this should show that. That's also too definitive. So remember that all of your text can be viewed by many people through many different lenses. Okay, and for that reason, sound confident in your writing, but don't sound definitive, and use low modality language. Beautiful. More of the basics. This is a bit of analyzing argument revision, but is very important. So this is the first thing that we're having a look at. Remember that in analyzing arguments, your body paragraphs are comprised of an argument, a topic sentence based on the author's argument that you've identified, and are just a repeat over and over of the what, how, why process until you close that paragraph, essentially. So you need to get really, really good at conducting this process. And this is just your analysis of persuasive language techniques. It's the majority of your body paragraphs. So I've split it to make it easier to understand into the what, how, why process. The what aspect is what language is the author using. This is the persuasive language technique that you've identified, and you name it using the appropriate meta language and you quote that technique. Okay? Then, once you've incorporated the evidence, you've completed the what stage, you move on to the how stage. This is where you look at the intended effect on the audience. This is your analysis of how the author aims to influence readers to think or feel, to make them want to do something. So, this is the author's intended effect. And then the why. So, the why is all about why it supports the author's argument. So it links back to the topic sentence, essentially saying, how does that make that argument more convincing? How does it contribute to it? Or it links back to the contention, the overall argument to the piece, and analyzes how it makes that big argument seem more convincing, how it achieves that. Now, when completing this process in your body paragraphs, obviously, when you analyze a persuasive language technique, you have choices of either just analyzing the intended effect, the how, or just analyzing the author's argument, how it enhances it, the why, okay? Or you can analyze both. If you're aiming to analyze a persuasive language technique in depth because you think it's really significant, you may complete both the how and the why, okay? And this is just depends on the piece of the quote that you're working with, the technique. So let's look at it in a little bit more detail. So the what is where you ask, what is the author doing? The language that's being used, and you must quote it, name the technique if there's a technique, there should be in language analysis. So as an example, the author makes use of overtly negative language, such as terrible human being, to establish Chris Brown in an unfavorable light. So the technique that's been named is negative language, and the quote is terrible human being. Keep them nice and succinct and short. And it also it also explains that evidence by saying that it's being used to establish the celebrity in a bad light. A few more examples there. Okay. Then, once you've introduced the evidence and explained it, you may be analyzing the intended effect. And that key answer that you're asking, the key thing that you're asking, you're basically answering the question, how is the audience being positioned by this persuasive language technique? What is the author aiming to make them think, feel, or do? Intended effect, not actual effect. So this is where you need to be using that low modality language. So thus, the author invites readers to consider how their support of Brown might endorse his harmful behavior. So you need a lot of vocabulary for intended effect, because you shouldn't be saying the intended effect is, okay? So using words like aims to, invites, we see some great ones, seeks to, elicits feelings of. You need quite a bit of language under your belt for so you can make different intended effect sentences without repetition, and make it nice and specific. So this one makes the audience think that supporting Brown might make him behave even more outrageously. This one says that it elicits feelings of fear. This one says basically creating an us against them. Some readers are being marginalized because they support the celebrity, okay? And they're being excluded from the in-group. So these are some examples of making sure you're using that language correctly in argument analysis. Not saying things like this makes reader feel afraid as a substitute. This is intended to make readers feel afraid. It's the author's intention, but is it successful? We don't know, so thus we don't judge. Now, looking at the why, this is where you ask, why does this support the author's argument? Either how does it enhance the effectiveness of the argument you've presented and outlined in the topic sentence for that paragraph, or linking it back to the contention, their overall argument. So this is the most complex one. This is where you can really show off some great ideas. Looking at an example, as such, the author creates a comprehensively negative image of Brown, furthering the idea that he should not be allowed into Australia. So the whole idea here is that how it supports the overall argument is that comprehensively negative image, it's impossible for readers to perceive him in a positive light anymore whatsoever. Thus, furthering the idea that he should not be allowed into Australia, enhancing the overall argument of this author. A couple more examples there. Beautiful. So hopefully that what, how, why process helps you encapsulate how all of your evidence and analysis should look like in language analysis, and hopefully it makes you think back to year 12, when not so long, think back to year 11, when not so long ago you were writing your analyzing argument sex. Now, this slide is quite important for text response, but basically the elements of a text that you need to be able to find and analyze include all your structural features and evidence, your characters, your themes, and your views and values. And guess what? These elements need to be part of your essays. So you need to have opinions and notes and quotes on all of these things. Views and values might not be quotes so much, but it just might be your interpretations of the author's intent. So looking at structural features, these are the majority of what comprises your analytical essays. And you need heaps of these to get high marks. And as I mentioned previously, a variety is needed as well. Your characters are a big bulk of your evidence as well. So this is kind of interlinked with, structural features and slash evidence. But you'll be quoting from them a lot and analyzing them. Just make sure to discuss them as a technique, not saying, Romeo represents, but the author depicts Romeo as, in order to, so you can't use language that makes it sound as if the character is alive because they are a construct. So make sure you don't have a combination of character name plus basically an author's intent verb in one place, because it's not an appropriate way to write. Instead, focusing on them as constructs and analyzing them in that way. Themes are self-explanatory. You can get thematic prompts, and then your whole essay has to link back to a theme and how it is presented in the text according to you. But you need to have lots of notes on themes, be aware of all the major themes pervading your text, have lots of quotes, and have many opinions when it comes to themes. Views and values are what fetches you those high marks in your essays. So be really confident in your interpretations and use extra resources if you need to get more ideas about views and values. Remember that I mentioned it's not enough just to include views and values messages, authorial intent messages, in your concluding sentences for each paragraph. They need to be there as well. But occasionally do this as well when you discuss evidence. So I used to aim to have it 2 times per body paragraph at least, somewhere down the middle of my body paragraph maybe, and then in that concluding sentence to make sure I did it enough and to make sure my essay had enough interesting, complex ideas. Look for text-specific structural features. I mentioned this, genre, specific language devices. You need to find and analyze. For films, there are heaps. If you haven't done a film yet, hopefully you'll get the chance in year 12. It's really fun. Um, and I've just written a little mini list of some examples of techniques that come up for a certain text type. So if you're working with a film, you need to be able to understand and apply in an essay terms like mise en scène, diegetic sound, what type of shot, high angle shot, close up, etc., and analyze them. So having a look at an example, we're looking at a play. So the play Medea, and the prompt says that the crucial conflict is between reason and passion. So looking at an example that aims to include some structural features and use the appropriate meta language, she's described as not a woman but a lioness, with the nature more savage than a Tuscan Scylla's, conveying her dehumanization as a result of her actions. So it's just using the meta language that it conveys her dehumanization. We see another one. Animal imagery is also employed when the nurse sees her glaring at them like a bull. So animalistic imagery is when animal-like qualities are being assigned to a person to paint them in a certain light. And we see that meta language has been used here, and we've made it clear to an assessor that we've analyzed a structural feature. All the animals used to describe her are unpredictably dangerous and aggressive, paralleling Medea's own savage temperament. So she's further likened to an animal, because to draw parallels between things as a technique, and this is a technique as well, means to say one thing is similar to another thing, okay? So the appropriate language again has been used, paralleling. I stress the importance of authorial intent slash reason values analysis and mention it again, but authorial intent gets the A's at least 2 times per body paragraph. Have reason values analysis as a general rule for all of your text response essays. And if you need a little bit of a refresher on this, but we're talking about what the author's message is, their intention behind their words, any message they're trying to convey, any opinion they have on absolutely anything. It may be a certain theme, it may be a certain value, whatever their opinion appears to be about it based on how they've constructed the text, using the appropriate vocabulary. So what do they endorse and celebrate and say is good? On the other half of it, what do they question? Maybe they present contradicting opinions. And what do they critique and say is bad? For instance, how do you write about authorial intent? You take a structural feature such as a metaphor, and then your next step would be to analyze the metaphor first. You still need to discuss what the metaphor represents, zoom into that language, and explain how the metaphor creates a certain effect and what it actually means. And only after analyzing, if you wish to extend your discussion to make sure you get the authorial intent analysis that you want, then you might go into more detail and consider writing about what is the author's message in utilizing that metaphor to represent that idea. Looking at an example from an English text, let's say the quote is a description of the reflections of the Palestine Republic as bent and brown. Our analysis would then be of this imagery and descriptions. Maybe we say that it shows the intriguing nature of the description and links it to the palace history in East Germany, and we link it to the context. But then if we want to write about authorial intent, we're looking for a message. We say the author is suggesting that, so we make it clear through our language, last name of the authors plus authorial intent verb, that we're talking about their message, and then state the idea that links into that analysis. And we see this idea links into the sociocultural context that we previously analyzed. Okay. So overall, if you're looking to score highly in this subject, you need to be addressing all four elements of a text in all of your writing: views and values, themes, characters, and structural features. You need to be quoting often, be confident in how you incorporate quotes, and this is a skill that you need to have. Having really nice quote integration, being able to combine quotes and analyze as one to get more evidence in your essay without having to write heaps and heaps of words. So practice quote integration and blending. Focus on structural features analysis, those language techniques, more often than characters and just plot of the text, because any student can do this if you want to stand out, differentiate yourself by finding and analyzing language devices and structural features. Have strong and interesting as well as justified analysis of authorial intent. No memorization of essays because they need to be specific to the prompt to get even decent marks. So answering prompts, planning for prompts, prompt breakdowns are really important tasks in English as well, especially this early in the year. Um, have a counter argument to your opinion for a prompt. Don't just be one-sided, and focusing your arguments on ideas rather than characters or examples. Arguments must be ideas, all right, in relation to the prompt. We'll look at that in a bit more detail. This is just a bit more on using that appropriate language to talk about characters, to make sure that you're not writing about characters as if they are alive, being aware that they're just constructs. And looking at character analysis, do look for how authors describe characters, because often, because they are constructs, they've been created by the author for a reason. There are underlying qualities that the author has assigned to that character to show their own opinions and messages. You know, they make us like or dislike a character for a reason, or they make that character sort of really gray and have both good sides to them and bad sides to them for a reason as well. And it's your job to be able to find that and analyze that. So use characters as evidence when you feel it is beneficial and important. So make occasional references to the way that the author portrays their characters. Another example, how to write and how not to write. Now, when analyzing characters as well, you can get character prompts. I want to stress that getting a character prompt doesn't mean that your topic sentences are about characters or mention character names, okay? Your topic sentences must focus on arguments, either linked to themes or views and values. It's not a one character per paragraph. There should be more than one character in each paragraph mentioned and analyzed, okay? So, how to not write? Let's have a look in relation to this prompt. Characters in I for Isabel have suppressed their emotions. You agree. Don't write. Character 1 successfully suppresses emotions. Character 2 does as well. And for my third body paragraph, my topic sentence is something along the lines of, however, character 3 has not suppressed their emotions as my counter argument. But it needs to be about those broad ideas. First paragraph writes about how characters find it difficult to suppress emotions because of past experience that have wounded them. Body paragraph 2 instead writes about the different approaches they take to triumph over their emotions and to challenge them. And body paragraph 3 presents the idea that many suppress their emotions to different extents, but none of them actually succeed, for example. And then each paragraph will have more than one character discussed, evidence from more than one character being analyzed in order to justify that argument. All right, now we're going to look at text response. So remember, I said that this is your analytical essay. It's based on one chosen text, and you get the choice of two prompts on your exam, and you can choose one of those prompts. Each part of your exam is worth a third of your exam marks. They're all equal, and it's marked by two assessors that, following the same VCA criteria that you have access to from VCA, they look at that to give your essay a mark out of 10. So as you can imagine, we've just talked about character-based prompts, but unpacking and planning for prompt is one of the most important things you need to be skilled at for text response. Because your essay, most importantly of all, has to be relevant and answering the prompt. Even if you wrote an amazing essay and it almost has no relation or little relation to what the prompt wants you to do very specifically, you will not get even medium marks. Okay, so it's really crucial. So how do you unpack a prompt? First, determine the category that it belongs to, and I've given you guys a table here. Our character-based prompts will mention a character's name or a group of characters. Thematic prompts will mention the name of the theme that the prompt wants you to write about. Views and values prompts suggest a certain message of the author. More rarely, they can be about the audience's interpretation. Structural prompts mention structural features, usually starting with the word how, and want you to write focusing more on analyzing structural features and the text construction. Okay, but for all of these, you need a counter argument. You set a main opinion, and you have a counter argument of some sort. So annotate the prompt. Make any phrases, words that were unclear clear to yourself. Maybe use your dictionary. You can rephrase the prompt to make it easier for you to understand, to create arguments in response to it, and question that prompt to come up with ideas for your topic sentences and your main interpretation. So when unpacking a prompt, there are a few ways you could plan your arguments, and here are some suggestions. You could start your first body paragraph, and this is just basically what your argument is about, okay, for each paragraph. So one structure that goes quite well is if in the first paragraph you're essentially defining the keywords in the prompt and providing examples for them. So if your prompt is about a certain theme like loss, maybe in your first body paragraph, your argument and your body is about the different types of loss that are seen in the text and how it affects characters, for instance, in various ways. Paragraph 2 would be exploring the causes for the prompt statement and how these are seen in the text with the loss example. What causes loss to occur? Does it happen naturally? Is there some external interference? Just as an example. And then paragraph 3 would be exploring that would be your most complex argument of all, because it would look at the consequences of what the prompt suggests and significance of these. Alternatively, you could examine cause of conflict in the text as a first paragraph in relation to the prompt. What causes the conflict that the prompt is bringing up? The second paragraph might be exploring the response for the prompt statement and how they're seen in the text. And the third paragraph might be examining the effect of what the prompt suggests. So just to make it clear, we'll give an example. Friendship is more important than magic in Harry Potter. To what extent do you agree? Our first body paragraph might be aiming to define those keywords, friendship and magic, talking about where we see them in the text, what different types there are, and the argument would center around that. The second argument and body paragraph maybe writing about what causes friendship and what causes magic. What are the reasons that friendship occurs? What are the reasons we see magic? Basically, characters using those. And what are the consequences of friendship? And what are the consequences of magic, positive or negative? And what kind? Do they vary across characters? All ideas that you could use to phrase a topic sentence. So, unpacking prompts, remember those four elements, bringing it back because it's super important. Look for beyond the basics, look for language devices for your evidence, symbols, illusions, imagery, language use, dealing with characters as constructs. Author depicts the character as, in order to never saying, oh, kid character represents this, character represents that, because they need to be viewed as constructs. Look at the themes, the core ideas your text deals with, and be able to zoom out your analysis into messages and authorial intent. So I suggest basing your notes for your text response text around this and looking quotes for each of these sections of the pyramid. A recommended structure for how to write your text response. So this is your body paragraphs. Teal is good. It's not about how complex your structure is. Stick to the basic structure and make the body, the actual, what you actually write, make that complex. Make your ideas complex, but follow a solid structure, and you will be rewarded in VCE English. So starting with a topic sentence, this is your argument. This should be the first sentence of every body paragraph. Present an argument in response to the prompt. That clearly indicates your opinion, whether you're for or against, okay, what the prompt is saying. Then it's a repeat of evidence and analysis, evidence and analysis. So integrating quotes into sentences, not putting them at the head of the sentence or as a separate sentence, or giving 10-word quotes, short, succinct quotes integrated to flow smoothly within your sentences and have to be explained what the quote actually means, how it creates an effect before you then analyze. Okay, so your analysis is all about explaining the impact or significance of a quote, linking it to themes, views and values messages, and finishing your paragraph with a concluding sentence that gives the overall authorial intent, author's message in relation to the argument you stated in your topic sentence for that body paragraph. So a concluding sentence and a topic sentence have to be linked. Okay, a concluding sentence ties back into the argument to give the author's message for that argument. Remembering authorial intent should be done more than once per paragraph. You can expand your analysis for a piece of evidence to go into authorial intent ideas. How do you write your intros? So all introductions in text response could begin with a context sentence that introduces the text and the context of that text, that mentions the text type. Then you should state your contention that you've planned. That is your overall answer to the prompt, and it should indicate both what your main opinion is and what your counter argument is in relation to the prompt. And then you have an outline of what your arguments are going to be for each body paragraph, and you close with a views and values / authorial intent statement. And because it's just your intro, your statement about the author's message can just be something simple for now, okay? But it closes that paragraph very smoothly. Now, why do we have context sentences? Your context sentences are going to help stop you from getting stuck in starting your essay. And you can still make them fun and creative. They don't have to be conventional. So a conventional one may look something like this, set against the backdrop of rampant industrialism as our social context. Charles Dickens' classic novella, A Christmas Carol, endorses the notion of the value of life. Obviously, how else will we introduce the title, the author's full name, the genre and text type, and the context? So context sentences are very important, and we see a different way to do it. Obviously, the next sentence would then have to still eventually bring in the title of the text, and that might be done as part of the contention statement, but that's missing in this example just so far. So you can open it in a creative way. Now, for introductions, some key things. Don't mention genres of the text unless you will be discussing it. So I recommend always mentioning genre of the text because it is really good if you analyze genre specific features and devices. So try to get yourself to do it. Try to get yourself to practice analyzing the structure and construction of a text as well. Don't mention anything about the author's history, the author's life. That should never be a thing whatsoever in the essay. We only care about the text. Um, and you can mention something about the text and the world of the text. Having a look at this example, Mary Shelley challenges the bounds of reverie in her novel Frankenstein as she describes Frankenstein, the book, as a hideous progeny in the text preface, signaling the significance of creation in the novel. So we see these broad statements are beneficial for your intros because the whole idea of an intro is you're starting really broad with the context of the text and then you're narrowing it down to tie it into the prompt when you give your contention that is directly answering the prompt. So try to create these broad statements about the world of the text in relation to your essay prompt and what it mentions and wants you to discuss. And your body can have a view. You should always have a views and values connection in the final sentences, um, and that should be the case in your intro as well. Just you can make it something a bit more simple for your intro and signpost your arguments. Personally, I used to skip that step. I didn't used to signpost my arguments. I used to try to make them clear within my contention and elaborate on the idea of my contention statement instead. And that's completely optional. You can either have signpost sentences of your arguments following your contention. If you do what I did, you need to be really careful because your contention then should clearly sort of hint at what your arguments will be. And that can be a little bit tricky to do, but it's something you could practice. I feel like it's more fun to write without having to repeat all of your arguments in different words. Um, Now, for your body paragraphs, remembering that your topic sentences are your sub arguments, and all of your topic sentences, your sub arguments, have a connection to your contention. Okay, they need to coincide with the outline of your arguments in your introduction, and they need to clearly stem from the contention that you've written from your interpretation. They need to be linked together. They must be reworded. You cannot be using the same words when you outline your arguments and when you write your topic sentences. And they must be answers to your prompt in a nutshell. So, general rules of topic sentences: don't have quotes there, don't have any specific evidence, no evidence should be mentioned unless it's a character prompt that gives you a specific character name or specific two character names. In any other circumstance, there should not be character names in your topic sentences. And it's an argument. So something that you're trying to prove in the rest of your paragraph. It needs to be an idea that requires you to prove it in order to successfully be an argument. So your assessor should read it and think, okay, tell me how you prove your idea. VCA judge your topic sentences very, very closely. So this is a skill that you need to be working on throughout throughout this year, and just showing you the difference between topic sentences versus concluding sentences. The topic sentence states your key idea for the paragraph, and the concluding sentence gives what the author is saying about that idea, presented in the topic sentence, showing you exactly how these two are linked. And we see an example there. Feel free to have a read. Um, your concluding sentences are really important. Make them as impactful as possible. They do stand out. Some of the parts of your essays that assessors look at the most closely are your entire intro, I would say, and especially your contention and your topic sentences and your concluding sentences. These they pay a lot of attention to. So put your impressive ideas in your concluding sentences. Detailed body paragraph structure. Remember, starting with a topic sentence and then following that teal of evidence and analysis, evidence and analysis. To elevate your essays, you can try to have a couple of different sub arguments, a couple of different ideas that you analyze separately in the paragraph for each body paragraph. So you can have a two-sided body paragraph that tries to justify your topic sentence by having a couple of different ideas and evidence analysis to try to prove that topic sentence idea. And we need to finish with a views and values sentence. So a couple of examples here about with these authorial intent statements. Therefore, Hitchcock ultimately suggests that women are restricted by the social roles of the time. Roles has been put here because there was a typo in the sentence. In his presentation of women who die when they don't conform. So this is the author's message that ultimately the social norms are too strict. Okay. And they really sabotage women's livelihood. And that's the author's message there. Note the vocabulary that was used. Look at the ultimately. That's a really handy word to use. We see an authorial intent verb has been used as well. And I've added just a couple of more examples for you that are different. And for conclusions, you can structure them with a first sentence that is just aiming to summarize the overall idea of your essay. You may start something like, overall, Shelley explores the complexity of human morality in Frankenstein, and it is through the creature that Shelley considers they may possess both good and evil. So that summarizes the overall idea of your essay, kind of links to your contention in a way. And you just spend some sentences summarizing and link back to views and values as well in your final sentence. This is where you should put your most complex authorial intent message, and it is the one that you've basically gotten to, you've justified throughout your whole essay, that you've eventually been able to lead into. It's completely fine to have a 2-sentence intro. It's not a comparative essay, so your intro can be 50 words, and that's completely fine. Questions you can ask to come up with a really good ending views and values message are: what is the author saying about the world? What did they endorse? What they condemn overall? What does it say about the human condition? What is their overall message through their text? Now, for our structural features, again, I'm just bringing this up when we're looking at text response again. If everyone is studying in English texts of different genres, you must analyze genre-specific literary devices for the text you're working with. So, for example, for films, the expectation, and if you do a film this year, is that your evidence should basically be 50% approximately film devices and techniques, 50% quotes that you think are significant, okay? Characters and themes and all of that. So a 50-50 split. So make sure to get really confident and research your text, become really familiar. You'll need these skills for crafting text as well to work with different genres and text types. Now, to avoid summary as well, remember that we need to try to analyze rather than summarize. A lot of students still don't seem to get what it means not to summarize. So I've included the definitions here. Summarizing is when you rephrase evidence from the text in our own words, you over contextualize it. And when you analyze, you're actually interpreting the evidence and why it's significant, how it's important. So as an example, is there any analysis happening in this sentence? Though Juliet beseeches Romeo to be some other name, he is reluctant to abandon the reputable name of Montague. Sentence sounds pretty. Is there any analytical idea there? No, this second half of this sentence just over explains by giving us his actual name uh, and doesn't hold any significance. Now, in our analysis example, Juliet reveals she is willing to no longer be a Capulet if Romeo will not deny his father and refuse his name, thus demonstrating that her strength and boldness surpasses his. She is even more brave and courageous. So that's a theme analysis in this particular sentence, and we see a nice blending of quotes and being analyzed as one. Oftentimes, including more quotes to uh, before you analyze is a great way to have to avoid explaining what was happening in the plot at the time at all for your evidence. Oftentimes, just plopping a second short quote in helps to clearly indicate where the quote is from. Okay, so that's a good tip as well. Avoid retelling the story by having evidence and analysis in the same sentence. Okay, so try to just make yourself write in a more succinct way and have evidence and analysis in the same sentence to avoid spending too much time describing, retelling the story. So let's have a look at this example. Thunder meets Miriam, and when she does, she calls her cartoon boy. So what is this? When she does, she calls her cartoon boy. Could this be said in a more concise way? Why are we telling back who said something to who? We don't need that detail, okay? So instead, when first meeting Miriam, Thunder likens her to a cartoon boy, highlighting the unrealistic and unbelievable nature of a very human and real character. So we see the evidence and the analysis has been put in one sentence. We've changed the vocab to just likens her to completely avoid having to ramble like this. And then, moreover, Miriam is holding a single rose in front of her body. The issue with this sentence isn't also just that it doesn't have the analysis yet, but also it's really not smooth, and it's showing that you can't write very well if all that your sentence is just a quote, because all this is a quote and there's nothing else. So these are really short plain sentences that show that the student isn't very good at sentence flow, structuring an essay, and this is to be avoided. So, having a look at how we could change it, Miriam holding a single rose in front of her body symbolizes the foreign nature of her traumatic past, as well as her tragic love for her late husband. So, evidence and analysis has once again been put into one sentence, and then we see this closing with views and values message. Beautiful. All right, now tips on quotes, very important. Mid-range essay students will start sentences with quotes, which I mentioned not to do, include very long quotes, 10 plus words, without analyzing them. such as that standalone sentence we just looked at. So both skipping quotes analysis and including evidence and not analyzing it is very, very bad, but also having that really short sentence that's just a quote, and having to start a new one shows you can't structure sentences well and integrate quotes very well. Aim for quotes as well that are 5 to 6 words wherever possible. Sometimes you will have to have a longer quote, but you need to try to break it down using square brackets and ellipses. Mid-range students might also end a sentence with a quote and then move on to a different example or idea without finishing it. No quote modification, again, not cutting them down, not using square brackets, ellipses, techniques that you have under your belt to be able to integrate them in a grammatically correct way and in a more succinct way. They may state that a quote proves a point without explaining how it does. So the link between when you analyze evidence, when you first explain evidence, you must make it clear through your explanation how it creates the effect that you're presenting as part of your analysis. And that link, how is the effect created, must always be there. And they might include only 3 quotes for a paragraph. So avoid all of these. Now, high range students will aim for shorter quotes, paraphrase parts of the text, and only quote the most relevant language, aiming for very short quotes and heaps of them. Integrate quotes and analysis within the same sentence while it still flows smoothly, never leaving a crucial quote unanalyzed, having a mix of blended and analyzed quotes, modifying quotes using square brackets and ellipses. So we see an example of a modified quote. You can pretty much cut down every quote to be shorter. And triple dot means that part is omitted. So leave has been omitted. We can use square brackets to grammatically change words to make them fit a sentence. So we've added the word ending ed to make it fit the sentence and integrate nicely. And you should be pulling from a variety of different characters and moments across the text and discussing and analyzing quotes alongside structural features and language devices. So those are hopefully some great tips. Now, say again about rote learning. If your essay doesn't match the prompt, you won't be eligible to get decent marks at all. So don't rote learn your essays. Always just practice working with different prompts. Showing how it all comes together. We have a prompt in After Darkness. Friendship is the primary powerful force for good. Do you agree? Your main contention is your main answer to the prompt. Whilst friendship promotes good throughout the text, so we agree with the prompt. And here's our counter argument, is that one must also consider broader determining factors that create good in the microcosm of World War II. So we're saying that there are other things other than friendship that enable that good. And then your arguments, your topic sentences are like your why, that show why you believe what you do in your contention, in your main argument. So we see an argument for friendship that shows how access is force for good, another argument for friendship, and the argument that is the counter argument that says there's something else other than friendship that is potentially a bigger force for good, and that's been that exposure to a greater world. Prompt breakdown to help you guys. Things that you can do, highlighting your key terms, making sure you understand them, rephrasing prompts to make them easier to answer. Figure out what your opinion is, how much you agree or disagree, making sure you have a counter argument, making up questions to come up with ideas for your topic sentences. See an example here. Despite Atwood's portrayal of Gilead as soulless and destructive, she has nevertheless succeeded in giving the reader a sense of optimism. To what extent do you agree? Keywords we've highlighted: soulless and destructive. Is Gilead really portrayed as soulless and destructive? And the reader is given a sense of optimism, so we need to question whether the reader really does get a sense of optimism or not. Okay. In this case, we chose to maybe rephrase the statement into a question to make it easier to answer. You can also move words around as long as their meaning doesn't change. Um, and then we start questioning this prompt to come up with ideas for our topic sentence. Is Gilead completely soulless? Does Atwood succeed in giving the reader optimism or not? What else happens? If not optimism, what else does the reader feel? Is this what Atwood even set out to do? Maybe she had different intentions than that sense of optimism. Why is there optimism? Why would there be? What is she aiming to do? Or link it to views and values? Is the optimism due to Atwood's portrayal of Gilead, or is it in spite of it? Or there are other factors that are creating that sense of optimism? So this could be an infinite bank of questions, but basically answers to them can be what forms your topic sentences. So then you create that complete plan. You would also add your evidence and quotes for each body paragraph under these. But let's say your overall contention is that Atwood's Handmaid's Tale is a harsh admonition of regressive theocracy and patriarchal hegemony, offering a sense of optimism only in its reformation. So basically, we're saying Atwood completely throws away this sense of optimism. We don't agree with the prompt statement. Instead, Atwood represents a really strict belief system, a regressive theocracy, and a patriarchal structure. So, anti-feminist men rule the world, offering optimism, our counter argument that does agree with the prompt, offering the optimism by suggesting that maybe things can change. Only if things can change. And then the arguments for that: Atwood celebrates the endeavor of the human spirit. So Atwood does create a sense of optimism by presenting people in a certain way, yet she portrays a dismal state of humanity. Ultimately, she doesn't exceed in affording a sense of optimism because she didn't set out to do so. Instead, this is a critical commentary of the depiction of this world, this dystopia, and the belief systems and value systems underlying it. So remembering that you need a counter argument. So you need to be here or here. Either you agree more or you disagree more with the prompt. You cannot completely disagree, you cannot be neutral, and you cannot completely agree. Two arguments for one side and a counter argument for the other side is what you should always aim for with every essay. So how do you study for text response? Don't make mistakes listed in the examiner's report. It's early on in the year, but you guys are year 12s and you have done these essay types in units 1 and 2. Feel free to jump on, read examples from high scoring students, read feedback that VCA gives to get an idea, even this early on in the year, of how to write and how to not write, and identify areas of improvement before you've even started writing. That is a really effective use of your time. And as you study text response and your other areas of study, work with practice exam essays and examiners' reports feedback more and more. Read critical articles to get analytical ideas and ideas for strong interpretation so you can stand out in the English cohort and stand out later on in the year in the exam. Develop strong interpretations, have notes, ask yourself questions. A good way I used to come up, and I used to do this in VCE literature, a good way to come up with strong interpretations is to sort of come up with questions of why the author did certain things or why certain things happened and write them down and just sit on them. I would either ask my teacher or try to find the answer out by talking to other students, or I would sit on it and I would think of something. And I used to think of all of these complex ideas that way. Of course, critical articles can help gauge some of these as well. Add analysis into your quote banks. Don't just have quotes written down, but do a mini analysis, put down analytical ideas for each quote that you're planning to use. This is giving you an opportunity to directly practice essay writing, because most of the body of your essays is evidence and analysis, evidence and analysis. So do mini dot point analyses for all of your quotes. To show complexity in your writing, this is what I personally recommend. As I mentioned previously, your body paragraphs, your topic sentences sort of need to evolve. So what you can do is, for a first body paragraph, you can always start with that tunnel vision, which is just like a basic answer to the prompt. You know, what did we look at this prompt? It might just be something about optimism. Oh, Atwood doesn't something about this soulless and destructive portrayal. No, Gilead, she instead presents characters as optimistic, etc. So you start with tunnel vision. You start with a basic argument that just outlines those key ideas or key words mentioned in the prompt, gives examples of how they're shown. Then you can consider a different perspective, a bit of a however statement, a counter argument to yourself, and finishing with a nuanced views and values paragraph, where this topic sentence would be literally about an idea that the author is trying to present. Remembering just a couple of tips that I've already actually mentioned. But essentially, what you need to be thinking about is that your ideas need to be building off of each other. So, idea one, which is your first argument, should be just something building from your contention, probably your most simple one. Your idea two should be an argument that you can only make after your first body paragraph, an argument that you can only make because of what you said and proved with your first topic sentence. So it's stemming from your first topic sentence, your second one. And your third topic sentence is your most complex one, and it can only be made because of what you established in 1 and 2. So that could be, it works with this structure, a nuanced views and values statement that you can only make because you've broken down this keyword or keywords in so much detail and presented your ideas about them in your first 2 topic sentences. All right, now looking at crafting text. So essentially, this is changes as of last year for year 11. So you all would have studied crafting text last year. Hopefully nothing too difficult to understand, but essentially teachers and schools choose a framework or a broad idea as the focus for this assessment task. So essentially, it's almost like a theme or some kind of big idea that you will have to write about and you will have to examine in other texts to inspire you how to write. So things like future, bravery, human connection, belonging, storytelling, surrealism, could be anything, but in year 12, the choice is from a specific set of 4 frameworks like country and specific mentor text. So if you're studying a certain text, the mentor text may be specified by VCA that they want you to look at. You engage in creative writing, but the creative writing is purely of your own creation. It isn't, an excerpt of that you wrote to fit into the book. It's completely your own creation, but the way that you depict the framework in your own work, let's say your framework is belonging, the way that you wrote about belonging has been inspired by a few different authors or one author of a certain text type. So you may choose to write in a different text type, but try to reproduce that theme or that big idea in the same way that that author did, okay, or in a similar way. And then you do write a statement of intention for the SAC, not on the exam, but for the SAC, where you write about how the mentor texts have inspired you, how you noticed that they represented this framework in their text, and how you chose to stray from that and how you chose to replicate that in your own work. Um, so essentially, the main skills are being able to closely analyze texts, being able to work with different text types and be aware of different text type features, being able to write in various modes, and creative writing. So, genre features are important. Bit of a cheat sheet for you guys. Um, as you can see, you've written out all of the main sort of text types. These are the ones that you could realistically write a shorter piece for a school-based assessment slash exam. Okay, I haven't included like novel. A lot of the mentor texts that you will look at will also be, shorter. You can be looking at things like short stories, letters, poems. You can even look at something like a song. Um, and they can all be something that you can use. And I've put some of the main genre features for you guys, so feel free to have a read through. Hopefully, I feel like a lot of this is intuitive after you pay attention to it. Like, you just need to analyze one little text of a certain text type until you fully understand what these genre features are. Back to the pyramid of structural devices, characters, themes, views, and values. Now, I did say that you will need these skills all year, and we can already start to see the overlap. But for this area of study, just like for text response, you need to be able to work with all of these four elements and include all four elements in your work, except this time you have to do it as the author yourself. Think about how you will make all of these things apparent in your piece, in your crafting text piece, and how you will also be able to analyze them and link them back to your mentor texts with regards to your framework in your statement of intention. Essentially, you become an author, but you become an author that's still taking things from other authors, okay? So it's not so bad. For students that struggle with creative writing, be systematic in how you break down these mentor texts and literally take things that you like from them and do them in your own way with a slight change to them. If you feel confident being creative, even better, you can completely put your own spin on things. Um, so let's imagine you've been assigned a framework like belonging, okay? And you understand, you've broken down the idea for yourself and you kind of understand everything it could possibly be about. You've then gone and read up on it. Now you get a mentor text that you will have to use to write your own creative, for example. How do you prepare to take this mentor text and analyze it? So first of all, you need to break down the text type for yourself. We said this mentor text is a short story. Okay, so short stories have the least structure. In terms of creating creative writing, they're one of the easiest and most common choices made by students, and you may choose to do this for your crafting tech stack. It only needs a few characters and dialogue, some plot development, and there is lots of flexibility. There's lots of flexibility. There's no set structure. You can do third person, third person. There's lots of mentor texts that are suitable to inspire your short story. They may be short stories themselves. It can make it easy to incorporate your key theme, to incorporate your framework in a very clear way. And they do have interesting language devices and techniques that you can include because this will be something you are assessed on. You will have to include some language devices in your creative writing, and it's easy to do with short stories. And it's almost automatically interesting if you do it well because it combines dialogue, thoughts, descriptions, and plot development. Now, what else do you need to know about this text type? Now, commonly, short stories can be structured in a specific way. We commonly see a single plot from one person's point of view rather than seeing multiple perspectives or plots. And the plot typically follows with an exposition, a description that starts off the short story. Um, then has rising action in some way. It tries to slowly build and accumulate tension to make it more interesting. It has a climax where the tension is at its peak, something has happened, and it's followed by a resolution at the end. The tension has fallen, and there's some kind of conclusion to everything. So, typical structure of a short story. They're centered around themes. That's why it's so easy to incorporate the required framework. If you're writing in a short story format, oftentimes it's presented as some kind of challenge or struggle or conflict. So that's how you could incorporate your framework there as well to make it be the center of everything. Okay. There's conflict that the character has to overcome. I do suggest if you're writing in short story format, base this around, uh, incorporate that framework, base it around the conflict. It's description focused. You need to be able to write really good descriptions. Use the five senses when you write your descriptions. Um, Try to describe things in interesting ways that make the reader feel like they're there. And descriptions and dialogue mainly drive plot development. Dialogue especially drives the plot. Okay, now, characterization is crucial for short stories. There should be lots of implied, hopefully, information. Um, Implied is always better than obviously stated information, so make lots of things um, obvious, but in an implicit way. You can choose the perspective that you want to take. Um, and first person point of view will probably work better with a lot of frameworks to make it clear the main character's perspective and relay more ideas. A first person perspective would usually be better for a crafting text task. And basically, remember, I said, let's imagine our mentor text is a short story. Let's even imagine that, for the purposes of your SAC, you lack this short story and you were going to write a short story too. So, before you read every single one of these mentor texts, you need to be all across those text type features. So now you familiarize yourself with text type features, you can actually read the short story thinking about if you were the author of your own crafting text piece, you took inspiration from this, how could you write your piece while adhering to the genre conventions of a short story as well, and while adequately incorporating your framework. So this is just an example of how you may closely analyze a mentor text, okay? Uh, so we see that it starts with a bit of a hook. Yes, she said, it's incredible. It's an abrupt start rather than just having an exposition there. The exposition follows next, and it makes it easier to spark the reader's interest. It was quite stupid of people, she thought, to make everything, even conversation, so interrelated and dependent that she could not say merely that it was incredible, but must be referring to something preceding or obvious. Nothing exists, she thought, unless it depends on something previous. People are incapable of realizing anything that does not bear upon that interrelation. In that case, it was the number of warm days that was incredible, instead of anything more important, and there seemed to be so few important things, she thought desperately, besides the weather. So there's lots of exposition. It's revealing that the protagonist of this short story, that has not been named, has huge perspectives on the world and people. It's revealing that she thinks people are quite generally plain and boring and have no depth to them. They have no understanding of important things, in a sense. People are incapable of realizing anything that doesn't bear upon that interrelation. Nothing exists unless it depends upon something previous. If it doesn't depend upon something previous, these people don't care about it. So it's revealing her perspective. It's describing her internal world. So, through the context of, let's say, looking at the framework of belonging here, it makes it clear that she doesn't exactly feel like she belongs already from her thoughts. Okay? It's clear that she is sort of isolated, maybe due to personal choice from being close to other people. She views herself as separate. I like it though, said her mother. There, her mother liked it. In the pattern which existed around and in and was part of her mother, there was a place for liking the weather. Look, said her mother, she's there again. We see that the dialogue is driving plot progression. It introduced another character, and it introduced something else. She, whatever she is. And that's building tension because we don't know yet who she is. Thus, something outside the pattern was only a subject for comment, never as real as the weather, never as permanent, only a subject for look. She's there again. Again, she's criticizing um, her mum's perceptions now. I thought she had moved, and a good thing too, said her mother. No better than she should be. Decent people expected to live with a woman like that. More than a person should be expected to put up with. I suggested to the landlord that he put her out. Again, it was not the concreteness of the act of forcing a woman out of a house that was important. It was the fact of mentioning it to the landlord. What a queer interpretation you put on things, mother. So this again reinforces that idea that the daughter really disagrees with people in general and her own mother. She senses this prejudice that her mom, as well as other members of this community, other people living in this building, the prejudice that they have for this unnamed woman. And she doesn't think that the woman is deserving of it. She does find it cruel, but now two people sort of don't belong. The woman, the unnamed woman, has been deliberately excluded, and internally, our protagonist feels she doesn't belong or agree with most people. Okay, so we see, thus, imagining that this is about belonging, how it has been depicted, and it has been depicted through a conflict, that there is a clear difference in perception between the mother and the daughter when it comes to this social exclusion of the woman. That's what relays the framework of belonging in this short story and how it's been constructed. Now, there's a bit of a climax, the peak of their disagreement. Queer to refuse to live in the same house with that woman, and now she comes and stands on the corner. On the corner, the corner was important, more important than the woman. A bit ironic there. And there's description then to slow the plot progression because the climax has already occurred. And a bit of contemplation included there. Basically, it sounds sarcastic, these few lines where the protagonist examines why, the woman isn't considered good enough for anything. She doesn't even deserve the corner, essentially, of the street. He nears a resolution where the conflict ends and subsides. There, said her mother, don't blame the poor creature. You don't really know, and anyway, she's to be forgiven. The woman, then, existed to be forgiven, not blamed, not understood, just forgiven. So we see it still centers around that idea of belonging. The daughter still disagrees. She doesn't understand why the woman can't just be accepted or left alone, why she has to be critiqued, why she has to be the topic of discussion. And there's a mention of a clear resolution, and the story then ends. Beautiful. So hopefully that makes sense. So essentially, that's how you would break this down if this was your mentor text, if this was one of your mentor texts. Note the benefit of looking at the text type features first of a short story and how much more that aids your understanding when you break down the construction of the text. Okay, and in a way, this is exactly the things that you need to be planning for and thinking about for your own writing. So if you took inspiration from this specific short story, you would be aiming to create this internal voice that's, critical of everything, sarcastic, lots of internal description of emotions. In a way, a lot of it is quite implicit, it's implied, not obvious. So if you like that style, that could be something that you take. You could also create a character that doesn't feel like they belong and doesn't feel like they want to belong because they feel like people are all wrong. Okay. So just finally, your considerations. You need to plan themes. This needs to be part of your plan. That should all be around your overarching framework. The framework has to be the most prominent in your piece because this is what you're assessed on. Now, look for views and values. Decide what message you want to relay. What's your moral of the story, or just in general, the opinion about something that you want to make clear from your work. That opinion or moral of the story can be around your framework as well. And it's a lot better if it is, because of course it should connect to the theme. So you would be thinking, my theme is belonging. How do I want to depict it? How will I achieve that? What message will I make clear that I have about belonging? Plan your structural devices. As we mentioned, these must be included. Don't use cliches, don't use those generalized sayings. To overcome, if you really struggle creating language devices of your own, take the inspiration from your mentor text. Use what you like that they did to create your own thing. So you could take that internal dialogue uh, from the short story that we looked at. You could take the sarcasm and put your own spin on it, and those would be your language devices, for instance. Uh, Tension as well from the short story we looked at, and just a few tips. In general, aim to write as if the plot is happening in real time, unless your genre requires the use of past tense, such as a diary entry. I recommend for description to make it better, use language that attacks the five senses rather than just showing the reader what they see and what the setting looks like. Instead, describe it through the five senses. So if you were there, what would you hear, or what would you smell? What would you see? And you may just choose to do a couple of those or one of those. And we see a pretty description here. He yells over the intense ambient noise of conversation and snippets of discordant soprano sax. That's just using those auditory descriptions, but it makes you feel like you're there. You're in this noisy, bustling, busy environment. Um, and avoid explicitly telling your character's emotions. Never say, oh, character is nervous. Instead, describe how you see that. He's shaking his foot, quivering his lips, flickering his eyes. So describe physically how the character changes so the reader can imply what they're feeling. Make sure you're adhering to conventions of dialogue. Any new speaker gets a new paragraph and new indents. There should be a comma, or you can use a dot as well before the closing indent. Limit continuous dialogue. It should be short because you don't want to make it appear as if people are talking at people, talking at a wall, rather than with them. They should both have a say in the conversation. And if you think about natural conversations, you take turns speaking, okay? So a good rule is less than 3 lines per speaker. Vary your sentence lengths. If you have a look at this example, lots of longer sentences being used here, or it's just one sentence, I think. Um, you can use long sentences to reduce tension, to create a slow pace, sense of relaxation, relay emotions like romantic, nostalgic emotions, um, and then vary and mix it up with short sentences when you want to create tension, a fast pace, make it stressful and dramatic. Choose whether you'd like to write from first person or third person, and I've detailed it a little bit here. Like I said, it may be easier to relay a framework with a first person perspective, simply for the fact that you can get into so much more detail with um, the character's emotions, and it will still be subtle. You can still make it subtle, but it's still very optional. And some narrative techniques to make things more interesting. You can mix up time to make your story more interesting. This won't work for every text type, but if you are writing a bit of a story format, diary format, it does work for a lot of text types. And some things you can do are like freezing time, stopping time to give more information, looking ahead, flashbacks, and changing the pace. And you can do that for your sentence lengths as well, as we looked at. To create a nice start and end that are not only interesting but wrap together quite nicely, you can use bookends where the first line/lines of your piece begin some sort of idea or technique, and the very last line or lines of your piece actually finish the idea or technique that was used in the beginning. So they're like two halves and they complete each other. Um, and we've look at an example here. If we started with, she looked deep into his eyes and wondered how they'd ever ended up together in the first place. And then we finish with, she looked deep into his eyes and wondered how she'd ever been without him. All right. So I think I've covered all of these things, but hopefully everyone has a bit of an idea what to do for this crafting text area of study and some things you can do in the meantime. And again, don't forget about techniques. I've added just some names here, some interesting ones to think about. All right, now our short section C uh, section C bit about analyzing argument. We already looked at the what, how, why process of analysis. So if you need to go back to that, you can actually pause and go back to that. But I'm just reminding of the criteria that we have, but it's all about analyzing the author's argument. Um, Now, we'll focus today on looking at contentions that go in our introduction, but we won't go in a lot of detail. Come back in April for that because analyzing argument is still so far away. But when coming up with a contention, it needs to include all of these elements, essentially. So think of an answer to these questions. I recommend you use this flow chart. So for the specific, let's say, opinion piece that we're reading, what is the issue? The contention statement should just briefly mention the issue. Does the author think the issue is good or bad? Use a relevant adjective or vocabulary word to describe exactly what they think it is. Why do they think it's good or bad? Because what are the implications? What's going to happen? What's so negative or good about it? And what does the author want instead? What is their ultimate goal? What do they want to convince us of? So the author contends. So you would usually have the last name of the author and contends in a contention for analyzing argument that the hostile attitude of male cyclists, this is the issue being stated, is unacceptable. We've identified that the author thinks the issue is bad. The adjective we've used is unacceptable. Why? What are the implications? Because it endangers other road users, and calling for a more civil communal manner. So their goal is to come up with an alternative. Okay, so I've also written it out, but this is basically the same information written out in a more neat way. These are the things that need to go in a good contention. Additionally, you need to mention the tone, okay? And here is a template. The author, in what kind of tone, let's say critically contends that the issue is adjective because what are its implications, and therefore this is what they want to do instead. Really handy formula. So, in an introduction for analyzing argument, you must cover these elements. The contention, and as part of the contention, must cover the tone word and what the author wants to be done instead. All of these elements need to be there as well. But you will begin with the context. Essentially, what is the piece about? It's a bit of a broad sentence. Then your contention and tone should pretty much be in the same sentence. And you also need to mention what the audience and purpose are. Now, body paragraphs must be idea-based. And you need to remember that what, how, why process. Okay? And don't forget about the why. The why is that most valuable part of it. How is everything convincing? How does it link back to the argument? Your final sentence should link back to the ultimate authorial intent or the effect on the readers. Visual analysis. Any image or visual that is given to you as part of your piece must be analyzed. And it must be analyzed in a body paragraph. It doesn't get a separate body paragraph. It should always be in a bigger paragraph. So you must find which argument the visual relates to and find a way to link it in. Now, how do we do this? Let's imagine we have a topic sentence or an argument. We analyze some evidence from the text, some persuasive language techniques, completed that what, how, why process, and we find an appropriate part to link in the image, maybe just chronologically even, based on where the image is embedded in the text. So then we need to connect the evidence with the image to start talking about the image. So, for example, the image further reinforces the idea that, and the idea that we were just analyzing. That would be an appropriate way to link it. Then we do the same what, how, why process for the image in relation to the argument and connect back to the argument and the ultimate intended effect when we're ready to close that paragraph. An example of the what, how, why process in practice and the author's imperative language as evidenced by his repeated use of the words must and need. We see that that's our what, our evidence, creates a sense of urgency surrounding the public response to gang violence. That's where the evidence has been explained. This encourages readers to support his call for decisive action in the form of stricter penalties for those involved in violent acts. So we see all three have been done. I said you only need to do two. You can do what and how, you can do what and why, but ones that you want to analyze in more detail, you can analyze PLTs with all three parts of the process. So you can see it's nice and succinct and it's very specific and none of the ideas are repeating. We can see each persuasive language technique has been named with the relevant meta language. We can see short and succinct, nicely integrated quotes have been used, strong vocabulary. And this is more a bit of a plan for how to do visual analysis. I know I've just explained it. You find that link, you say that the visual further supports an idea that you've just analyzed in a nutshell. Your first sentence should be just to describe what the visual is literally depicting. State what type of visual is it. Is it caricature, cartoon, diagram? State what type of visual it is and what it literally shows. What do you see in the foreground and the background? Is there any central element without analyzing anything yet? And after that, choose 1 to 2 things to conduct the what, how, why process for. Make sure to use correct meta language when analyzing visuals as well. And discuss how that visual adds to, it usually does, the writer's argument as part of that. So these are things that you can look at in a visual. You can practice with this with this visual, but expression would be appropriate to analyze here. The actual dialogue box, the sign, um, but some of these have included meta language for you guys to help you out, but a lot of it is quite easy. Now to finish up, as you're coming back to school, if you haven't yet, you must read and watch all of your texts if you want to do well in year 12 and stand out in year 12. Look into some supplementary materials to help you. Try to get ahead of your cohort so it's less competitive for you this year. Start with text response because the skills carry into literally everything else. And crafting text, you shouldn't attempt until you've really started with text response because, as we said, you need the four elements. You still need an ability to closely analyze your text, all the things you do in text response. Language analysis is easier for a lot of students. Do some revision of it. Um, don't stress about it for now as it's still far away. Now, as you read your text, try to annotate. Think that everything has been constructed for a reason and question why. It will significantly differentiate you from the rest of the state. If you get into this habit, your ideas, if you keep doing this, your analytical ideas will only get stronger and stronger and stronger. Your interpretations and your views and values will get stronger and better over time. There's a little bit of a list of things that you can look for. But ultimately, definitely look for quotes that you can use and language devices that you can analyze and organize your all your annotations into notes. Don't aimlessly write essays. If you do, spend time planning based on what I've shown you today. You make plans like that. Every essay or paragraph you write should have a purpose, and you should be trying to actively improve something as you write it. You can test out new ideas leading up to your SACs, experiment, and work with different difficulty prompts to make sure you can do both. Pinpoint the weaknesses that you struggle with and target improvement. So if you find that you can't write good topic sentences, instead of aimlessly writing essays, you'll probably be taking prompts and planning the contention and topic sentences for each prompt. And you'll be doing that over and over. If you didn't know how to integrate quotes, you'd be writing practice sentences, trying to integrate quotes into practice sentences, and eventually writing body paragraphs, for instance. Writing essays isn't the only way to study for English, so here's some more ideas for you guys. But read through past essays, examiners' reports, do those plan activities. They're very quick to do, so it's a really good use of your time and directly helpful for the exam. Work on quotes analysis, topic sentences, writing. Focus on writing whichever paragraphs you struggle with. So do you struggle with intros? Do you struggle with body paragraphs? Do you struggle with conclusions? You can just write the ones that you struggle with as well. The body paragraphs are beneficial to all students. Create your own essay prompts, accumulate notes on feedback and how you plan to improve, rewrite essays that you've written to try to make them better. There's lots of ideas there. Anyways, thank you guys so much for coming along, and I hope you found this Headstart lecture to be really helpful. Just want to wish you best of luck for the rest of the year and with the subject. Thank you, everyone.